Hey there and welcome back. This is Harris Benjamin and you are listening to the audio series named The 6 Foundational Movements. This is part 7 where we're going to be going over part 6, the final movement category in this group called the weighted carry. All right, so if you remember, part 1 was an overview of the whole series. Each subsequent part has been a specific movement category. This is the final one in the 6 movement series here. The weighted carry, the loaded carry, anything where you are walking and moving across space with weight, with added resistance, is going to be in this category. And this is a very unique one, different than the previous movements, something that, again, most people do not specifically train, but we do every day in our everyday lives without maybe realizing. And this movement is going to be just so unbelievably beneficial for your life, right? From a practicality standpoint of how you get around every day, from a functionality in your core and your posture and everything in between. I'm going to get into more details in a bit. It's just I can't speak highly enough about this exercise and training this movement in your routine. All right. It's also really fun. I think it's different because, generally speaking, right, the previous movements, the squat, lunge, and hinge, the upper body push and pull, are more stationary movements, right? You're generally not moving across space, right? You can, which I'll get into today, but you're not moving across space while you're doing them, right? Your feet are firmly on the ground, or one foot's on the ground, or you're maybe moving kind of in one small box, but you're not really walking for distance or anything like that. Whereas in this movement, the weighted carry, you are specifically, right, picking up and holding additional weight to your body, and you're going for a walk, right? And it can be many ways, right? You could walk quickly, you could walk slow, you could kind of march with one leg coming off the ground, but in some way you're walking. And what this does, right, is it trains the core in its most fundamental, rudimentary fashion, right? Like being good at keeping your posture in alignment, in a healthy position, in a strong position, while you are having extra weight try to kind of pull your body down. So if you can imagine, your friend asks you to help you move furniture for their new apartment or their new house, and you go over and you have to constantly be lifting boxes and carrying them to the truck. You have to help move a couch. You have to move a dresser. That is what we do every day in our lives, right? We carry grocery bags from the store to our car and to home. We carry our kids in our arms or in a stroller, right? We push them in a stroller. All of these things count as weighted carries, weighted walking. But if we train them specifically with even more specific technique, with even more specific load and progression, every other thing I just mentioned in your life, right, carrying kids, carrying furniture, carrying bags, moving things around your house, is going to feel easier. You're going to feel like more of a badass doing it. You're going to look better doing it, and you're going to be a lot safer doing it, which is one of the bigger things, right? Because no one likes getting hurt, and unfortunately, and I've done this before myself as well, right? So I can't say I haven't. Unfortunately, most of us wait until it's too late, until we have an injury, until we have a little bit of a pain, to then start taking it seriously and try to work on our bodies. So don't do that, right? Learn from my mistakes, learn from the mistakes of many other people, and train your body in the smartest way right now. So you absolutely must be doing intentional weighted carries in your training on a weekly basis, if not more, at least once a week, if not more. All right. And that means, right, picking up weights in your hands. It could be, again, these could be dumbbells, kettlebells. You could hold suitcases if you're traveling, right? I've had many clients do that while doing travel workouts. You could hold suitcases. Anything else you can get your hands on. You can do another position that I love is the bear hug position, which is basically where you bear hug something in your chest. So again, if you're traveling, you bear hug a suitcase, a duffel bag, a backpack. You could hold, a kettlebell with your hands at your chest. You can hold things on your shoulders, sandbags, right? You could literally just hold your kids and go for a walk, which I'm sure if you're a parent, you are already doing in some way, and that counts. But again, we want to do this with intentional posture and form as a training exercise. So It makes your body feel better and not worse. I know many parents have a lot of, back pain and discomfort from carrying kids all day, which is very understandable. But if you train this weighted carry movement properly, right, with your weights and with the right posture, and you progress it in a safe and smart way, carrying your kids around is going to be a lot easier, and you're going to be a lot safer doing it. So that's some extra incentive. Another cool thing about this, and I want to give you a little bit of a story with this movement, is that I'll, very frequently have people, ask me, family members, clients, friends, potential people that I might work with, just people I meet and start talking about life. They'll ask me like, okay, what should I start doing with my workouts, or what can I do with this type of equipment or this lack of equipment? And while these overall 6 fundamental movements that we've gone through in the series are the exact things that I will tell them, right? Because this is the well-rounded, well-oiled machine, fully, enclosed circle of movements that you want to be doing every week to get the best bang for your buck and to have the best, healthiest, most badass, resilient, amazing looking body. If I were to just meet someone and not really know them too well, or maybe not be that sure of their injury history, or just want to give them something that I know is like foolproof, I'm going to start them with this category, the weighted carry, right? Before any of the others, just because it's so easy to understand what it is and how to do it well, or at least good enough, that I trust I can just verbally tell someone on the street, like, hey, go at the next time you're at the gym, pick up some medium weight dumbbells, stand really tall like you're carrying grocery bags, and go and walk around until it gets really hard, right? That's it. That's all. And it works. It works tremendously well. If you are skeptical and you think this doesn't seem like it'll be tough, I promise you're very wrong, but I encourage you to try it out. It is incredibly tough, just as anything is if you push it towards your limits, but this movement is brutal. But also, remember, if you're someone who thinks like, oh, brutal, I don't want to do that, I don't need to do that, it doesn't need to be brutal, right? It can be very light and calm, right? You can hold some medium weights, light weights, you can kind of just move around and stroll around and get comfortable, but you can progress this or regress this anyway. So I've had every type of person do this successfully, right? Again, I've had people, men and women in their 80s, like 80 years old and plus, who, you would not think would be lifting weights, who are able to lift weights very successfully. I've given them, as little as 5-pound dumbbells in their hands, even 2-pound dumbbells works, but most people, like, again, if an 80-plus-year-old person who has never trained in their life can do 5 pounds, you can do at least 5 pounds, I promise. It should be much more, but she was doing 5 pounds, walked around the street outside, right? Incredible benefits. I've had kids do this with, 5, 10, 15-pound dumbbells. Perfect. I've had adults do this with much heavier weights. I've done this with much, much heavier weights. And there's people in this world who do this with, literally hundreds of pounds per hand. It's incredible. But you can do it anyway. The point is that you have weight added to you and you are moving around and walking. All right? Let's see what else. So the weighted carry is something that is going to help you avoid postural and core dysfunction, right? So a lot of people, right, have some sort of dysfunction in their posture, in their spine, in their back, the way that they stand, the way that they sit, the way that they feel, the way that their core is engaged, right? A lot of people have just, so many imbalances in their core development and their strength, and, it just promotes so many problems that I don't want you to have to face, right? So pain problems, so on and so forth, without going into the full detailed list here. But if you want to train core, if you know that's important, if you say, what, I would love to get my core stronger, right? I want to have a better looking, better feeling, stronger, well-rounded core. What should I do, right? Should I do planks? Should I do sit-ups? Should I do crunches? Should I do this or that? Again, I'm not going to get into those specifics at this moment, but what I will say is you should prioritize this, the weighted carries, above all else. It is the best type of core training because it is functional to real life. You're actually moving around and moving in space and having to stabilize weight, right, while keeping a good posture. And you can do it in lots of ways, right? You can walk forward. You can walk backwards if you're going safely. You can walk side to side. I actually highly, highly recommend that you do all of those on a consistent basis for many reasons that I'll get to in future episodes. You can hold, one weight in one side of your body and not the other. That way you have to, use more of your obliques and kind of a different part of your core to stabilize, right? You can do a million things. But you get the idea. I've talked about it. I'm rambling because I just love this so much. This is the final movement in this audio series named the 6 Foundational Movement Patterns, right? The weighted carry. One more thing before I forget, before the end of the episode, that I alluded to earlier, and this is something very cool that I actually only started to really consider over the past couple of years, even though I've been training for over 12 years now, and that is that you can train all of the other movement patterns that we've talked about in the series while walking, right? So basically doing a weighted carry and the other lifts in one motion, right? And again, that is a very nuanced thing. That's not what I would do for like the heaviest of lifting or for most of the time, but it is something that I actually utilize a hell of a lot in my own training now, and I have all of my clients do this with most of the movements at least a pretty good amount of the time. And again, I'll go into more detail on this in another episode, but essentially what you can do is pick a particular exercise variation in each of the categories, and if it makes sense, you can just do it while you walk, right? For example, I'll go through one of my favorite variations for each movement category. And I understand if this is tough to visualize without actually seeing it, that's fine. So don't worry about it. You can wait until you maybe ask me or look up a video on my channel of seeing it to do it. But just so it's, in your head and you understand that this is possible, right? Because I also find that my clients and myself enjoy this more sometimes than traditionally just doing the lift standing, because it's very engaging, right? Like you're moving, you can kind of go out on the street and do this while you're walking, and you're still getting the movement patterns trained. So it's a really cool variation if you find yourself like bored of just standing in one place doing your lifts. If you want to be moving more, if you want to make things feel a little bit more athletic, I think it's an amazing thing, and I'd be very, very happy to teach you how to do this the best way possible anytime. So just let me know. But here's one quick variation for each of the categories. So starting back at the beginning of the series, we started with the squat. I like to do something called the walking kickstand squat. And again, don't even try to just know what I mean by the audio part of this, because it's going to be a little bit confusing. But essentially, the kickstand is a position you can stand in. You can squat down and up from it, and then you step forward and you do another squat, and you just keep stepping forward as you squat. I love this. All right. For the hip hinge, you can do the same thing, but it's going to be a walking kickstand deadlift. So you have that kickstand stance, which means like your back foot, the heel is up, the front foot, the foot is fully flat. Your feet are pretty close to each other, right? It's a small stance, and you just do your hip hinge deadlift. You take a step forward, you do another deadlift, and so on and so forth. It works great, and you can actually go very heavy with it, and it's awesome. It's awesome. For the lunge, right? Walking lunges. Boom. For the upper body push, you can do a walking overhead press. I like to do it with a single arm at a time, and I like to do it with a dumbbell or even a kettlebell, but mostly a dumbbell. But you can do it with a million things, and you'll just walk in a normal manner, right? Nice smooth pace, and you'll continuously be pressing one arm up and down overhead, and then you switch arms. For the pull, right? It's not going to work so well doing like rows or pull-ups, but the band pull apart, which I mentioned in the upper body pull part of the series, is great. So you can get a band and you can go for a walk and you can do your pull aparts. It's awesome. It's awesome. Let's see what else. And then we're back, right? We're back to the weighted carries, and that's the carry. So you can absolutely be moving all the time while you're lifting. Again, there's more nuances, but it is definitely a possibility. So if you find yourself someone that loves training outside like I do, but specifically you like moving while you're training, right? You don't want to be standing still. There are variations that you could do to get this done, and it feels great. There's going to be one more episode here, so make sure you listen out for that final one. Thank you for joining me throughout. Again, if you have questions, harris@coachbyharris.com, or on Instagram, coachbyharris. You can message me anytime, share this with friends, family, everybody. And this final episode that I'm going to get to in a little bit is going to be sort of a recap one, but also it's going to be a very brief overview of other types of exercises that don't fall into the 6 foundational movement categories, or at least aren't, focused on these 6. in the way that I described. So I don't want to go on a big tangent with those because I want the point of this series to be on these 6 movements and prioritizing them. But you might be having questions like, what about this movement? What about that movement? I'll answer the basics of that in the next and final part, and then you'll be on your way to have a much more resilient and awesome looking and feeling body. All right, thanks for joining. Talk to you soon. Bye.